Okay, perfect. All right, welcome everybody. I am Brandel. I'm co-host Quentin and my site supervisor Fang. We are with California Climate Action Corps, and we're here today to talk a little bit about food waste and climate change. Um, we will hold questions at the end of the survey for about, or excuse me, at the end of this presentation for about 10 minutes. But before we begin, if you have not, please join and take our pre-survey. It's a really brief survey with But we've got that shared in the chat, and we're going to go ahead and start the presentation now. So, as I mentioned, we're with California Climate Action Corps. What we do is sustainability work through community-based climate projects. So there are many different CCAC fellows at many different host sites. We are hosted at California State University, Fresno, and primarily our team works on xeriscaping and native plant restoration, composting and food recovery, so edible food recovery and distribution, and then education and outreach like this talk. And you can see one of our co-fellows, Nathaniel, there pictured below. Um, we're working on building a more resilient and sustainable future for our community through climate action. So why are we talking about food waste with respect to climate change? It's a significant environmental issue. Um, it both wastes resources that went into growing and creating that food in the first place, and it is a driver of climate change. And we're going to go through together this presentation and hopefully highlight the link between food waste and climate change and how, by making some changes, we can reduce the impact. So, what causes food waste? There's a lot of things that go into food waste, but the primary reasons food is wasted are due to a combination of spoilage, transportation issues, which lead to spoilage, pests or equipment failure, which again lead to spoilage, over purchasing or culling, that is the discarding of things because they don't appear presentable enough to be sold to the general public. And of that food that's wasted, about 38% of all food that is produced is wasted. It's tossed. Half of that comes from the food industry, and 31% comes from retailers and consumers, according to the US Department of Agriculture, um, and also the Natural Resources Defense Council. Now, consumer level food waste is where you and I and most everyone has the largest opportunity for change and impact. The primary drivers of consumer level food waste are going to be over purchasing of foods. Not having a plan to use that food is going to lead to it not getting consumed or prepared in time, and it goes bad and gets tossed. There's also a misunderstanding of different kinds of labeling on food. The difference between use by, sell by, best by dates tends to confuse consumers and leads to food being tossed before it should be tossed. But there's also issues with improper storage of food and then lack of planning again, not having a plan in place for where the food that is being purchased is going to be used. Um, so we're going to talk about some of those things in more detail. Food labels, this is a big one. Even I didn't know this before really diving into this topic. If you'd asked me a couple months ago, I would have said these are all kind of the same thing. The best by date is not food expiration date. Best by is when the food is going to be at its peak quality in terms of taste. So that date should be more of a guide on when you're doing your meal planning and prep when to use the food, but it's not a guide on when it goes bad per se. Sell by date, again, this is more for retailers on how long they're going to want to display the food. Those of you who may have shopped at stores like a grocery outlet, for example, where larger box stores will off-sell some of their unsold or stocks, that food is going to usually be past the sell-by date, but it's not expired or gone bad. Last is use-by date. Now, in the case of baby formula, use-by date is a hard, no longer consume this after this date. But again, it's a recommendation for peak quality and it does not correlate to when food is expired. So if none of these labels tell you when food is expired, then how do we know when food's gone bad? Trust your nose. When foods are going bad, they're usually in the process of decaying and they're going to give off a musty, sour, or overly sweet smell that indicates decay. Our sense of smell of humans is not great compared to a lot of animals, but we do tend to know when food is off. So if you don't think it smells good, it probably isn't good. You want to visually inspect your food. So you want to take the time to look it over. If you see mold, um, mold is bad. You have to toss that. You can't cut out the bad part. You can't cut off the little corner that's got mold. Mold is a fungus. Fungus is a network. It will have spread through that food, even if you can't necessarily see it on the surface everywhere. So you can't just cut off the moldy corner of bread, for example. If food is canned, then if the can is bulging or dented or shows signs of rusting, that's an indicator that that is not safe to consume and it's time to toss that food. But if you're not sure, if you've got something and it doesn't quite meet any of these, there's a really great resource that I want to share with everyone. We'll put a link in the chat to this. Still Tasty is a great website. You can look up specific food products there and get a quick indicator as to whether or not that food is still usable or when you should look at it throwing it away. It does help to know when you purchase the food, though. So let's talk about what kind of food is most likely to be wasted or thrown away. As we said earlier, about 40% of all food, close to 40%, but 38% of all grains and bread. So this isn't just baked bread or baked goods. This includes things like cereal grains, rices. Those all end up being wasted at about this 38 to 40% rate. Dairy, 1 out of 5 gallons of milk gets poured down the drain in this country. That's about 5.9 million glasses of milk each year that get thrown away. Over half of all fruits and vegetables get tossed. Still Tasty, that we mentioned in the previous slide, has some real good examples of photos of food that are actually still safe to eat. Like people sometimes think that a black spot on a banana means the banana has to go. No, it's just a sign of ripening. So again, a really great resource, but there's a lot of misconceptions on when produce has gone bad and it tends to get tossed. And then meat and fish also are wasted usually because those do go bad, because they have a perhaps shorter shelf life for not being stored properly, and they just don't get consumed before they go bad. That is a good question, Doris. I don't know that I have any resources in other languages specifically, but we can look into that and perhaps follow up after this. So if so much food is being tossed every year, how much is that costing? On average, for any given individual, it's about 325 pounds of food annually and about $375 per year, or $1,500 for a family of four that is wasted on food. It's not just a waste of the direct cost of the goods, though, it's also a waste of your time. Shopping for food takes time. It often takes a lot of time. And what's more frustrating than spending 1 to 2 hours at two different grocery stores to get everything you need for the week for almost half of it to get tossed out? That's frustrating. So, and every time you go to maybe make some meal and you've got food that's gone bad and it's been tossed, that's another trip. You've got to go back to the store to replace those things. So it's really the costs are more than just the direct cost. If we look at the United States as a whole, there's some great numbers here that come in from the that show how food waste has been managed over the last 5 to 6 decades. So we can see that the amount of food that's being wasted has just increased and increased and increased. We've gone from a little over 12,000 tons excuse me, 12,000 thousands of tons to over 66 thousands of tons of food wasted by 2019. And you can see that there are other methods of dealing with that food waste, recycling, composting, other kinds of food management, combustion, and landfilling. Most of the food is being put in the landfill. That doesn't really begin changing until the 90s and early 2000s. And even so, very little of food that's thrown out ends up composted or combusted for energy recovery. Most of it ends up in the landfill. And the cost of that is $161 billion a year. Um, so why is this a problem? I mean, we're throwing away food that could have been eaten by someone else who's hungry. So there's just the waste aspect of it's not being used and it should be. Um, but as you saw from the last slide, a lot of that food waste is ending up in landfills, and that means that we have to create more landfills because it takes a lot of space. And food that is sitting in landfills generates a ton of greenhouse gas emissions, and that is where we lead into issues with climate change. So to explain that, let's talk about the greenhouse gas effect. For those who are unfamiliar, so when food waste ends up in a landfill as opposed to being composted, it decomposes in a way that is without oxygen anaerobically. And that kind of decomposition of food creates the gas methane, which is a really powerful greenhouse gas. It's more potent than carbon dioxide. And food waste is about 8% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. So it's pretty significant factor. And food that should not be thrown away is turning into greenhouse gases. So for the greenhouse effect, what happens is that incident heat coming in from the sun into the earth is going to reflect off the surface of the earth and back out to space. But as the amount of particles in the atmosphere that include carbon increase, carbon will act as a reflector. Radiant heat that is on a trajectory to leave is going to hit those particles and holding time of that heat energy on Earth. So we get the greenhouse gas effect. We've got a few different types of greenhouse gases listed here: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. So we can see that methane has less time in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide by a huge factor, but it's 80 times more potent at warming, at trapping the heat while it's around. So it is a significant contribution to total global warming levels. But the waste in food isn't just the gas that it emits. Um, there's a lot of resources that go into growing that food in the first place. There's enough greenhouse gas emissions from the production of food that's equal to 42 coal-fired power plants, enough water to supply 50 million homes, the amount of fertilizer used in the US to grow all plant-based foods for human consumption, and an amount of agriculture equal in size to that of New York, California, the states combined. Goes into growing food, just to the food that is wasted, not our total production, just food that we are growing and throwing away. So the secondary and tertiary costs are huge. So what can we do about this food waste thing? Well, I can tell you what California Climate Action Corps is doing. There's a couple different ways we are trying to manage food waste. The first thing we do is we try to prevent food from being wasted in the first place. We do gleaning activities. There are fresh fruit trees on campus, and there's actually a lot of farms close to campus on Fresno where we solicit donations of food that is not going to be picked or utilized, and we bring that to the student cupboard. So that food is a free resource then for students at California State University, Fresno, that they can take and eat and have some food security. So we try to partner locally to prevent food locally from going to waste in the first place. The second thing that we do on campus is we compost. We began with California State University, Fresno. Our first term was in 2023. And we have grown over that first term the number of sites we collect our food scrap. But we collect from the university dining hall. We collect from a Jamba Juice like place called Juice It Up on campus that makes fruit smoothies and so forth. So we have a lot of their pineapple stems and strawberry tops and orange rinds and things like that. We also collect from the youth education centers. There's two on campus. And Starbucks has graciously donated their coffee grounds, which makes our compost smell so much better. So we have been ramping up the number of places we collect food waste from and the amount. And we're doing this all by hand. We collect the food scraps and we turn it into compost on campus, on site, without having to transport it to a commercial facility. On the next slide here, we'll talk about like that process in a bit more detail. So we collect on average between 400 and 500 pounds of food waste a weekly. Currently, that's our current production rate or collection rate of food. We have to take off any labels like stickers on banana peels and so forth, tags that are on pineapple. For some reason, there's the tag stuck to one of those pineapple leaves. Sometimes the food is coming from like individual baggies of things like fruit, vegetable in the cupboard that didn't get eaten. We have to remove all of that waste that is not food. We then have to take those scraps and chop them. We've got to break them down into smaller pieces. We do that for two reasons. We have the skin surface to make it more easy for microbes to penetrate in and get at the stuff they really want. And once the food has been chopped up and broken down, we then create a lovely lasagna. We do a layer of food waste and a layer about twice as much brown material, which a lot of that material, again, is collected on campus from the grounds department who are trimming hedges, taking out bushes, putting new things in. We tend to avoid grass clippings because grass will go to seed and will take over a compost pile. But leaf debris, pine needles work okay, but pine needles actually are pretty tough and resistant to breaking down. We tend to stick to the decaying leaves and other plant matter. We mix that into 2-to-1 ratio and we water that pile. And it's going to take, on average, 2 to 3 months to take existing material from the raw food to a finished compost material that can be used for a variety of things on campus. And we have to turn that weekly or bi-weekly. It takes less turning the more the compost matures. But we do want to turn it to continue to expose the food to microbial activity, to continue to add moisture to it, and to keep the process going. We've also found that the larger our initial starting pile, like the bigger the volume of food, the quicker that pile will break down. Um, so if we look at our progress since we started this process on campus on the next slide, we see quickly how much we've ramped up our food waste production or collection. Next slide, Quentin, sorry. So we can see that we began collecting in late September. Oh, back one more, I'm sorry. Early October 2023. And over time, we have gradually collected larger and larger volumes of food. It took time to find and get trust and build rapport with all the different locations on campus. We don't collect everything. There are private restaurant businesses who serve food to students. We have a very large campus at Fresno State. They have their own methods of dealing with the waste, but we are approaching near total um, food waste recovery on campus. What we can't really do are anything to do with meat, and animal waste. All of our compost is from fruits, vegetables, grains, breads, that kind of thing. But we have ramped up and ramped up. You can see that we kind of have a plateau um, where there is a 1 month gap at the pro campus that ends in August and picks up again late September. So there's a bit of a plateau there, but the amount of food we've been recovering, the totals, and our cumulative total now is approaching 22,000 pounds that we have diverted as of the end of March of this year. That's about 48 cubic yards of food scraps. That's enough to fill 4 commercial dump truckloads of wet food waste. We have, using the EPA warm tool, diverted 6.2 metric tons of carbon emissions for our process. And that's probably an underestimate because the EPA's warm tool assumes a commercial level facility and a minimum driving distance of 20 miles from site source or from source to site to the composting production. And again, it assumes large equipment or trucks. This is the work of 6 to 8 fellows wheeling things on carts, using electric golf carts and chopping things by hand. Yet, any student volunteers we can coerce into doing work for 40 minutes a couple times a week. Um, now, if we go to the next slide here, we can talk about food waste again. As we mentioned, one source claims that about 40% of food waste comes from homes and about 40% comes from restaurants, 16% from farms, and 2% from manufacturers. Bring that up again to talk about how the EPA recommends the best to worst use of food waste. So again, source reduction. That's why the first thing we try to do is to collect food and make sure it gets distributed and used. I forgot to mention, there's a new program we have called Bulldog Bites, where anytime there's a catered event on campus and there's leftover food that doesn't get served for that event, we let students know, hey, there's food here, come here and get the food. And I think the food has been disappearing within minutes once the people know it's there and available. So that's another way that CCAC has worked with Fresno State to reduce food waste. So source reduction is the most preferred way. Food that is grown should be eaten. So we should stop wasting food by not having wasted the production level. We should give the food to people who are hungry. Next level is feeding animals. We're not able to feed any animals on campus. There are animals for the animal husbandry courses, but they don't eat human food. Industrial use, something we have access to on campus. So we're at the composting stage. That's where we do most of our reduction. The last place we want food waste to go is incineration, green energy, or for combustion energy. But even that would be better than a landfill because at least then it would be energy that's being used. So now that we've talked about how California Climate Action Corps manages food waste and composting, and what the EPA is the most effective methods for dealing with food waste, let's talk about how you, our participants, our listeners, can make a difference with food waste. Number one you can do is before you even buy food is make a plan. Figure out what you're going to cook before you cook it. Make a plan, make a shopping list. The shopping list and the plan will save you money. You won't make as many impulse buys if you have a list and a budget. Next thing you do is you want to store the food properly so that you are not having food spoil because it's not been stored appropriately with limited access to air or whatever the case per case basis is on the type of food. Third, if you have food that you know you're just not going to eat, you should donate it. There are all kinds of cupboards and pantries and programs around. I'm sure wherever you live, you can find a way to donate unwanted food. Please donate the food. Lastly, if you cannot donate the food for whatever reason, compost it. Composting is very easy. We'll talk about the composting again in a moment here, but there's also disposing of food in green waste bins. So in the state of California, food waste scraps have to be because of B 1383, you've got to put any food waste in the green waste bin. So that goes to hopefully commercial composting facilities now instead of just to the landfill. So if you can't compost it yourself because you don't have, maybe you're in an apartment, you don't have a yard or green space, please use the green waste bin. And then this isn't really with food waste, but general greening. Try to avoid excessive packaging and plastic in the first place. That's just extra emissions that are going into your food. I see some questions in the chat. We'll get to the questions in a moment when we open it up, but let's continue for now. Just want to acknowledge you, Lauren. I see that. Next page, please. So again, planning, prepping, and preserving your food. If you take some time during your week, maybe on a weekend, before you purchase to plan out your meals, that'll actually save you time later in the week. Better yet, if you plan out your meals, do your shopping in an organized way, then prepare the food ahead of time, or even cook it ahead of time. That'll save you a lot of time and money because once you cook food, you extend the shelf life of that food, right? If it was close to being or expiring and then you cook it, well, now you've given it another 3 to 5 days in the fridge and possibly much longer if it's frozen. So, last thing, again, if you're going to take the time to plan out, purchase, prepare food, please store it appropriately. There's appropriate storage containers. I would recommend Pyrex containers. Um, I don't like plastic containers personally. If you're going to get Pyrex, get older Pyrex, not just because thrifting is cool and climate friendly, but because they used a different kind of glass, and you could actually take old Pyrex from the fridge to the stove or to the oven and warm things through. New Pyrex will shatter. I think OXO, the OXO brand, not that I'm sponsored by anybody, their OXO glass, which is a bit more expensive, is actually like fridge to oven safe food storage. But that storing it will extend the life of the food. BYOB, bring your own bag. I think as of this year, California has finally banned the plastic bags. I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly, but let's pretend they have. Bring your own shopping bag to the grocery store. Not just shopping bags. You can get reusable, like mesh fabric bags for produce that you're not having to put produce in little plastic bags. You know, your bananas, your oranges, your well, potatoes usually come in their own sack, but you get the idea. You can get your own reusable uh, nylon mesh bags for produce. You can get cloth bags for bulk bin purchases um, that are reusable and they're made from natural materials like cotton. Um, you can bring your own water bottle. Fresno State, one of the great things about this campus is we have these water bottle refill stations. So anywhere, almost anywhere you go on campus, you can just fill a water bottle. You don't have to buy another plastic one. You can bring your own coffee cup to your favorite cafe, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts. They will fill your coffee cup, your thermos, whatever you have directly. Don't use their cups. One more thing, I didn't have a slide for it here. On the subject of proper storage, if you have one of those glass containers or Pyrex bowls, or even the plastic ones, you can take those to a lot of grocery stores to the butcher. They will put it on scale, the scale, and then you can add your 2, 3 pounds of chicken breast or whatever you want to it directly from the butcher. So you're not getting the cellophane styrofoam wrapped meat. You can get it directly that way, and they will only charge you for the weight of the protein they're adding. I know, for example, Winco does this, Sprouts does this. If you're familiar with those stores, just check with your local grocery store. I don't think Walmart does. You shouldn't be buying from Walmart for produce and protein anyway. But there are a lot of stores and even local butchers who will definitely let you bring your own material to package it. Continuing on. Um, so since we've talked about how you can meal plan, how you can prep, and how you can bring your own storage, Assuming you do have food that's going to go to waste, you can do composting. Um, Composting is very easy. Decomposing aerobically by adding oxygen as opposed to anaerobically, not being trapped inside a plastic bag buried under tons of other trash, you use less emissions by about 50%. You can sequester about a ton of carbon dioxide per acre annually. So that's something I didn't talk about earlier. When we first began the composting process at Fresno State, and we had a bit of area set up by the in the green waste yard, it was a hard, packed in soil surface. When you produce compost and you've got microbes that are interacting along with insect life to deal with the decomposing food, some of the carbon from the food that's breaking down ends up becoming part of the soil. So that's what we mean by sequestration. We mean storing it in the soil, and that is going to keep it from being part of the carbon cycle and going out in emissions longer. It also improves the water retention of the soil significantly. So using organic compost in soil improves the quality of soil for life, improves the quality of soil for plants, and improves the quality of soil for water retention. It's just really beneficial in more ways than just the reduction of the emissions. You're reducing carbon, and you're making the soil better at holding onto water. Um, so that's a good question, Katie. There were recently a few scandals with Walmart, specifically, very specifically, and you can look this up. They would list a certain item that would be, they would say like 2 pounds or whatever of say chicken breast, and you would go take it to a scale and it would be like 1.5 pounds. They've had issues with mislabeling the quantity of food. Um, and also because a they don't have the same butcher access that you can get to at another grocery store where you can go directly to a butcher counter, ask for the cuts of meat you want. Even with that kind of butcher, you can get paper wrapped protein, which is better than having cellophane and styrofoam wrapped prepackaged protein. So it's the reason I say that is because they primarily do the pre-packaged, and there have been issues in the last few years of them not properly weighing things. It's not necessarily a statement that means any more than that. It's just from recent events that have happened with them and the way they handle the food in the first place. Now, if you can't compost, again, understand living situations. I've been in apartments. I understand. The best thing you can do is make sure that your food scraps go into the green cart, and there you can actually toss things like your bones from and gristle and fat or any unused protein, because when that is in the green waste container, those go to in a commercial or industrial composting facilities or burning facilities for combustion energy. So they're able to handle that. The reason, by the way, I mentioned, I don't think I explained this in detail. The reason we don't handle animal proteins or dairy, like milk and cheese and that sort of thing, we're doing our composting is because the fats in animal protein are hydrophobic. They don't mix with water. They tend to create this fatty residue that doesn't mix with water, and it doesn't decompose the same way that the plant matter does. There are ways you can break that down. There's something called bokashi. I believe it's a fungus additive that is really good for protein. But typical at-home composting wouldn't be able to handle it. And it attracts vermin. It attracts things like rats, and you don't want to bring that kind of vermin to your compost site. That's why we don't do it. But industrial facilities are able to manage that kind of better. Again, in addition to the green waste cart, you've got your blue for your recyclables and your gray or anything that can't go into the green or blue. Not sure what goes in which cart. You can contact the city of Fresno, assuming you live locally. If you don't live locally, I'm sure your local city will have resources on what goes in what cart. But generally, in the state of California, green waste, food in the green cart, and at least it's no longer going directly to a landfill. That about covers most of our topics, most of our points in this topic, but I want to go ahead and bring a couple more things to your attention. So California Climate Action Corps has a couple of upcoming events later in the term. First of all, any time during the week, Tuesday, Thursday, we have community garden days that take place at a horticulture greenhouse. If you're local, please take an opportunity to join us. You can get some volunteering in. It's fun. We're working on green spaces on campus, and you get to learn skills and sustainability and agriculture and have fun. We have Campus Earth Day this year. It's going to be Monday, April 21st. It's going to be by the fountain near the center of campus. We'll have a lot of different activities and music going on. It's free. Please join us. We'd love to see you there to celebrate Earth Day. Beyond those events, CCAC member Connor has a workshop and seminar on composting. So if you'd like to see how we handle compost and what we do directly, you can please join us and get some volunteering in. I'm so sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, so Quentin
There,
just
there we go.
link for the
And then we also have we're not the only in town when it comes to sustainability and compost and Earth Day. So please look forward to this Saturday, April 12th at Fresno City College, an Earth Day event. It's put on by the Environmental Collaborative of Central California. We'll share links in the chat to both Connor's seminar for composting and the Fresno City College Earth Day event. Finally, if you would like to get involved for any Climate Action Corps, if you'd like to hear about what we're doing, we have a mailing list that you can please sign up for, and then follow us as well on Instagram. We'll go ahead and share these links in the chat with you as well. So that's our mailing list and then our Instagram page. We share about any upcoming events that we're aware of that we're involved in and give you opportunities to volunteer within your community and make a change towards fighting climate change. And lastly, we'd like to thank you very much for your time. We have a post survey that we would really appreciate if you could take. Again, it's just a few questions. We'll share the link in the chat and we'll post the QR code here. And at this point, we'd like to go ahead and open the floor to any questions you may have.
Yeah, so let's go back to Lauren's questions about was there a concern of liability from Fresno State with bulldog bites, and how was it addressed? Liability, yes, is usually a pretty common concern, especially when it comes to like food safety. So yes, it was a concern. The thing that like food safety law requires is really just that you can't move the food from the place it was being served. And if you do, you only have 15 minutes until it's considered no longer good. So realistically, what we do is we send out a notification to students saying, hey, there's food here right now. Come within the next 15 minutes. And so after that 15 minutes, even though we haven't moved it, it's still fine because it's still in the same place it was served. So it still has, it's still either like being cooled or being heated, whatever type of food it was. So we're still fine. It's more so just that we try to encourage students to come there and now so that we can also just clean up the food before the end of the event. The 15-minute rule is really more for our catering staff to make sure that they can kind of keep their own schedule. But as long as you're not moving the food to another site, there's no concerns when it comes to liability. And then I also see a question in here about, does the city of Fresno have a climate action plan that is supported by these food waste mitigation efforts? The city of Fresno is required now by the state of California to create not climate action plans, but climate adaptation plans. Um, and the state of California also requires that any county or city that has what is designated as a disadvantaged community, that municipality has to also consider environmental justice in those plans. So we're actually, our city is still currently in the process of like formalizing those plans. They went through some series of workshops, getting community input, but I believe they are not officially done gathering community input. So I think in the next few years, we will likely have a climate adaptation plan.
Do you have any other questions about our composting process or any of the data that I shared with you? Please feel free to go ahead and ask. You can ask in the chat. I think you can unmute if you would like to, but
I
please raise your
actually
hand
have
before doing so.
a couple details that I thought of to add as well, as far as composting food waste goes. Uh, in a lot of ways, like we talked about how like you can compost like pretty much anything. Um, for general like health and safety, I'd recommend not like, you know, putting meat or dairy in your backyard compost. I would recommend putting that directly into the green bin, at least, um, you know, for the time being, as far as our California and Fresno specific climate or like composting practices are developing. Just because when you put meat into like your backyard compost, as Randall said, it attracts pests and other things. But another part of that too is it can be extremely stinky, smelly, and it can invite a lot of harmful pathogens that otherwise in an industrial setting would be uh, burnt off, because in those industrial composting settings, they are such a large scale operation that the compost is able to reach such high temperatures that it uh, essentially eliminates any harmful pathogens or bacteria that could be breeding in the compost.
Offhand, Quentin, do you remember like the hottest temperature we've read off of a compost pile? I think we got to like 137 degrees, maybe.
Yeah, we've gotten right around 140, which the general working temperature for compost is anywhere from 120 degrees to like at a maximum generally for like a backyard or like small scale composting operation, you want it to be reaching 160. Otherwise, you risk the compost pile potentially combusting or just burning off all of the water that is necessary for the metabolic processes that break down the food material.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever been quite in danger of that. We've had a couple of piles where I think at one time we had a donation from our local farmers market, the Gibson Market, that's attached to the university. It sells produce grown by the university. Pumpkins. I think we had 1,200 pounds of pumpkins that were left over after Halloween and around Thanksgiving time. So those gourds, I think that pile that got really hot because it was just so much food that was going down. But that's unusual. Typically, we're handling again about 400 to 500 pounds of food a week. So I don't see any other questions. I'm just going to give the opportunity one more time if there's anything you'd like to know. If you would like the slides, we can send the slides out to anyone who registered. Links for all of the information I collected, sources are all cited within the presentation. If anyone would like those sources or citations, I can share those as well. At this point, though, if there's any other questions, if there are not any other questions, we're going to go ahead and end the presentation for today.
I just want to read out some of the comments in the chat as well. Elizabeth said, labeling your refrigerator, shelves, and drawers keeps things organized by those who use the fridge. Always load new or under and behind leftover to finish. Very good point. Also, just wanted to highlight the link put in the chat by Doris. The Good Samaritan Act does provide protection for food donations. And I've tried telling this to staff as well, but I think because not many people are aware of the Good Samaritan Act covering food donations, I think there's still I've still been met with hesitation when it comes to that kind of thing. So I do agree with you that the Good Samaritan Act does kind of like give us some protection there, but obviously, as I said, like liability is a really common concern, and I think a lot of people act on the side of caution. Um, but yeah, just also wanted to say one more time, if you haven't already, please take our post survey. Quentin, if you wouldn't mind putting it back in the chat just one more time. Um, Doing the pre and post survey just allows us to prove to the state of California that we are in fact educating people on food waste and climate change. So please do us a favor and make sure you fill out that post survey. Thank you,
I
Quentin.
also want to shout out Leah for sharing resources in Spanish, French, and English on food waste, and a couple of other sources in the chat. Thank you. Be adding them to our growing list of documented sources for things.
And
All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you coming and enjoy the rest of your week.
yeah, thank you so much. Everybody have a great day. I am going to stop recording now.